What is superimposition?
Sri Shankaracharya, one of the great siddhas of our lineage, defines superimposition in the following way. Superimposition is what occurs when you superimpose, you project back into the body of supreme consciousness something that you observed or experienced elsewhere, is the way Shankara puts it. And what he means by this is that uh, everyone until self-realized has a world of inner impressions. So what happens is when people are interacting with another person, a place, or a thing, let's say a person, just to use that in Nick's example, and then the person is no longer in your physical field, just quote unquote physical field, as an example, you continue to ruminate over that person. You continue to ruminate over the person's form, over the conversation that you may have had. That leaves an impression on your mind. And that impression is simultaneously deposited into memory. And memory is part of the Sushumna Nadi, the subtle body, that also houses the world of inner impressions. And so superimposition is this, it's a principle that describes a phenomenon where people project back into the body of supreme consciousness from the world of their inner impressions. And so why am I saying back into the body of supreme consciousness? Everything we do here in Nityananda Shaktipat yoga, we perform as a science. We call it Siddha science. And so part of that is taking every point of wisdom that the self-realized love beings of our lineage share with us, and then we treat any point of wisdom as a hypothesis. So in science, the way this works is you start with a hypothesis. So let's take an utterance that is shared quite often here, which is there is no outer world. Everything you experience inside within the body of supreme consciousness, which is your consciousness, reflected on the internal screen of the mind. That's the hypothesis. So with a hypothesis, the first step is to attempt to disprove it. That's always the first scientific step. And then if you can't disprove it, then you have to accept that one of two things are true. One, that either the hypothesis has a high probability of being true, or two, that it is absolutely true. So if we take the hypothesis I just shared, which is a point of wisdom here, that there is no outer world, everything you experience inside your own consciousness, reflected on the internal screen of your mind, are you able to disprove that statement? And in all the years in my own sadhana, which took place over a period of 18 and a half years, and then in all of the years that we've had our offering here, no one has been able to disprove that hypothesis to me. This is a point of wisdom that if you yourself attempt to disprove it, and anyone else who's viewing, I think you will find that you can't, and therefore you have to accept the fact that either it has a high probability of being true or that it is true. So based on that, people interact with people, places, and things on a daily basis in their daily mundane existence. You interact with people, places, and things in your daily mundane existence. If you ruminate over that interaction after it's over, there's an impression that's left behind on your mind that's deposited into the world of your inner impressions. And then what happens is you project, you superimpose from that world of inner impressions back into the body of supreme consciousness in your waking state, which we refer to as Jagrat, the state of wakefulness. And so I'll give you Shankaracharya's example, and then I'll tell a story. Sri Shankaracharya uses the very famous analogy of the snake and the rope. A person is on the way to the market, decides to cross a road on the way to the market, and as that person enters the road, the person sees a poisonous snake in the middle of the road. That snake rears its ugly head, opens its jaws to show its teeth, and starts hissing. So the person turns back, cuts and runs as fast as he can. Now, this person is a bit traumatized over this experience. So a month goes by, and then this same person decides, well, I'm going to go to the market again. I'm going to try crossing the road. So the person gets to the road, and as he steps into the road, there's a truck driving by, and the truck hits a bump, and out of the truck bounces a rope. And the rope is sitting in the middle of the street now, coiled up. The person looks at that rope, superimposes the snake onto the rope, thinks it's the snake when it's just a rope, turns around and cuts and runs again, completely traumatized, right? So that's Shankaracharya's famous analogy for superimposition. And so now I'll tell you a story to understand this further. I used to live in an apartment building, and there was a couple. They were close friends of mine, and they lived across the hall from me, Roger and his wife. And they had a subscription to Lincoln Center for everything that happened at Lincoln Center. So one day they were on the way to catch an opera that was part of their subscription. It was afternoon, it was broad daylight. Roger and his wife got mugged. They roughed Roger up a bit. All of their jewelry was taken, all of their money was taken. And so when I checked in on Roger later that evening, he was so upset. He said, I've canceled our subscription to Lincoln Center. I'm never going back there. Lincoln Center is a toilet bowl, he said. It's a cesspool. There are criminals everywhere. And so I laughed and I said, Roger, this is one isolated incident. You can't allow it to traumatize you to the point where you're never going to go back to Lincoln Center. And he said, well, yes, I can. There are nothing but criminals around there. Of course, that wasn't the case, but this was his impression because of the trauma they experienced. So I let a month go by, and then 2 months went by, and finally a year went by. And I was having conversations with Roger all along, and finally I decided, well, I'm going to try something to break this pattern that Roger is stuck in. So one day I put a black leather jacket on because he described the perp as wearing a black leather jacket with a black hat and sunglasses. And so I dressed in a black leather jacket with a black hat and sunglasses. I went across the hall and I started beating on the door really hard. Roger's wife went to the door first. She looked through the peephole and then she screamed, Roger, it's that man who mugged us last year. He's standing at our door. Call the police. So Roger came to the door, looked to the peephole, and then he screamed, and then he went to call the police. And then I put my mouth to the door and I said, Roger, it's me. So he came back to the door, he opened it with the chain on, and he saw it was me. And then he started laughing, and we both had this really rigorous laugh, took the chain off the door and let me in. And that was it. The next month, they renewed their subscription to Lincoln Center. So what had happened is that Roger and his wife were superimposing this one isolated incident. It's the first time they'd ever been mugged And they were superimposing that onto the entire Lincoln Center experience, insisting that Lincoln Center was a cesspool, that there were nothing but criminals there. This was their superimposition from the world of their inner impressions, from the inner impressions that were left behind on their mind after being mugged, that they continued to ruminate over. So that's two examples of superimposition. And that's how it works. So to address this, we have methods here and instruction that's given and points of wisdom that are offered, so that the key is when you don't need your mind to be active in order to engage in daily mundane activity. When that's not necessary, you can shut the mind down. That's the first thing. The second method is to, over time, we teach people how not to continually ruminate over people, places, and things when the interaction is no longer taking place, right? Because this is pretty standard, that when an interaction is done, or people are, experiencing a scene in a park, and now they go home, they continue to ruminate over that experience they had in the park. When the experience is done, it's over, it's finished. This, of course, creates memories. It creates what's called reverie. Reverie is the lock on the prison of the mind that creates more and more and more superimposition. And so we address this very directly, and that's how superimposition works. Any other questions?
Is superimposition ever useful?
Yes. So, for example, you want to, we embrace mantras here to quiet the restless mind. The mantra is a superimposition. So you're replacing one thought with another thought, right? You're thinking about pizza, you're worried about whether or not you're going to arrive at work on time, you're a bit distressed. So now you begin repeating your mantra, Om Namah Shivaya, to quiet your restless mind. That repetition is a superimposition in consciousness. It's just a more useful one. Because when you're repeating a Chaitanya mantra like Om Namah Shivaya, that mantra is going to dissolve on its own once your mind is quiet. That's why it's a superior form of superimposition, because once your mind is silenced, the mantra is going to dissolve on its own. So we chant mantras in the form of chanting here. This is also a form of superimposition. People are instructed to remember the form of the living Sadhguru, which people find incredibly important and powerful for experiencing the indescribable joy of the self, and again, making the restless mind quiet. Remembering the form of the Guru is also a superimposition, but it's far more useful. And again, if you're remembering the form of your Guru, once your mind is silent, the form of your Guru is going to dissolve. When the mind dissolves, you can't remember anything. It's not possible to recall an object, a person, place, or thing into your mind once your mind has dissolved, right? So the purpose of these types of superimpositions, which are part of the Aghora Shaktis, is what they're known as, is to address the restless mind, to make the mind quiet, to cause it to resolve, to deliver the experience of indescribable joy, at which time those superimpositions dissolve on their own. Hope that answered your question. Namah Shivaya.